So first things first, right? I actually think we'll just start with JDG, because the problem with this team, this is the ultimate team, by the way, to highlight why I wanted to do this piece of content. Everyone else is just doing the thing of like, right, let's just stress how much it's like impossible for anyone to beat them and how they're definitely the best team ever. Because essentially everyone's trying to set it up so that if they win Worlds and do the Grand Slam, we hailed them as the greatest team of all time. But like every team, they are beatable. I know it doesn't make sense because they haven't lost the best of 5, but even in those best of 5s, as I alluded to, there are ways to beat this team, right, Peter? Like, I mean, the obvious ones immediately to bring up is, even though it didn't end up working to win the championship, dude, I actually think LNG and what they did with ZK and top lane, like that showed that that's actually like a viable way to at least have a chance against this team, you know?
Oh, yeah, for sure. The problem I would say with JDG is I don't think a Western team can beat them. I think it's possible to beat them. The problem is that this team is really well constructed and all of the weaknesses of the teams are covered by each other, right? So if you look at Knight, historically in his career, Knight has been an insane laner, really good mechanical team fighter, right? Basically carrier of mid lane, or is carrier the Knight of bot lane. But, you know, if he has it set up for him, he's basically the best player in the world in his position. But his weakness was always like how aggressively he would push side lane, how he would play around Fog, how mid jungle synergy works. And the problem with JDG is none of that matters on his team because Kanavi literally covers for all of his weaknesses. And by contrast, you know, Kanavi struggled. When Kanavi has struggled in his career, it's been because his mid laner wasn't willing to play the picks to supplement his like carry jungle style. But you have Knight, who's one of the best mechanical players in the entire world, and he's playing Annie and Nico for the entirety of Summer. Like, I mean, it's so ridiculous. This team is just so ridiculous, and the only way I think you can punish them is either you have to be able to attack Kanavi, because I think there are vulnerabilities in this team. So I think that Kanavi, when Kanavi is off, you can beat him. You can beat them because I think Kanavi's understanding of the game sense, game reading, communication is covering for some of the weaknesses that some of his other teammates have, such as Knight. Again, I'm not saying Knight is bad. No. I'm just saying that Knight's weakness historically has been this. So you have to be able to take him out of the game, or you have to be able to like last Knight 1v1 or 369 1v1, and I don't think a Western team can do this, but LNG had a good shot at it, but they have Scout, right, who is arguably probably the best mid laner in the world right now, overall, depending on what you value. So maybe I can see LNG beating them. I can see in a theoretical world where Gen G would beat them, but it would require Peanut to be like on a ganking jungler doing like really, really crazy level 1, level 2 things. But I struggle to see how a lot of the teams in this tournament can beat them simply because they either don't have enough high variance pieces, or if they do have high variance, they're not. They don't have the mechanical skill to be able to go to match up. Like the only Western team I could theorize having a chance against team is Fnatic. And to be honest, I think like
why
Fnatic
specifically them instead of like G2, for example?
Yeah, exactly, and that's purely because of Razork.
Right.
The way that Razork plays his first 3 levels is really, really insane. And this, I think.
Also, it's also key to actually like attack Kanavi early. Essentially, you have to like get in there early on the jungle, right? Okay.
Exactly. But to be clear, like Edyoya and Yike, I think are really good junglers, but they play Kanavi style, but worse.
Right.
In my opinion.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. But to be clear, like Fnatic, I'm not saying Fnatic have a 10% chance, but like I could see a world where Fnatic take a game or 2. Okay.
By the way, I'll do it for Peter's benefit here, right? Which is the disclaimer, which goes like this. As I said, we're obviously not saying these teams are going to lose / be beaten. Essentially, this is like a scouting report. Like, even if you're doing a scouting report, guys, on Michael Jordan, you're still going to say, like, trying to make him take an outside shot, like in the mid-range or whatever. No, you still hit that at like 48% or whatever. But the point is, that's a better chance to win than him donking the ball on you and getting a guaranteed shot, isn't it? Like, that's what we're sort of doing here. We're sort of hypothetically coming up with a way they could win. Because I already know someone's going to go like, so Fnatic's better than G2. No. We're talking about a BO1 here in the Swiss system. And then we still might not win. Okay, Kira, what's your angle on this? Come on, how do you beat JDG? Because no one knows technically at the moment.
So the problem is JDG are perfect for the way that they want to win the game, which is team fighting. You cannot assemble a 5 players, right, that can beat GDG in team fighting, it would require a Korean super team. This is the problem, right? And that team doesn't exist. The way to beat them, in my opinion, is either you have the world's best skirmish mid 2v2 early game pace team, which LNG is not. They are not that team.
Oh, no.
But they have a very good...
They have the pieces to do it, though, right?
They have some of the pieces to do it, right? And that only got them so far.
Yes.
And even in that period, you had, for example, in both sets of BO5, I don't think 369 was playing his best League of Legends. He had good team fight, but I think that was a downtrend. And this isn't to undermine LNG, because what I think LNG done was amazing. It still didn't get them over the line. That's how ridiculous... Because you're basically taking the best team fighting mid and the best team fighting ADC, and you stuck them in a team with one of the best team fighting supports and junglers, and then you've got 369, who in any given meta has got a variety of flexibilities, and he's not bad enough at laning for it to usually really matter, and so you end up with a problem. The type of teams that, from my opinion, could beat them are Gen G, where they're able to spread out and extract huge amounts of gold off of the map, and not be baited into team fights. However, the problem I have with Gen G is they've not actually got the player quality, as in their players. They could have better players at playing their style. For example, they have Doran, right? For an example, they have Paze. I think Paze is a good player, but I think if Paze was Viper, I would think much better of Gen G's chances. You know what I mean? You see, the problem is JDG has the best of every piece, and the teams that can beat them as a percentage points do not.
Yeah.
The other thing I would like to highlight about the JDG, and this is a big weakness, is this is how LNG gets it is that mid 2v2. And this is the one thing I would say about Knight. I would contest how bad with Peter Dunn it was around side lanings. If you look at the TES teams, like Jackie Love, Karsa, 369s, I don't think anyone in those teams was ever any good at side lanings. People like to say that Karsa was, but I've never been convinced that angle. But Knight's never really had good 2v2s. Has not always been the best at playing around those types of things, and that's where the area that Scout and LNG like to supersede. We're now looking at Worlds. You look at how the game's going to get played. It doesn't look like we're going to be moving away from that. So they look pretty settled in to just continue to be doing that. With small implications of variance. I agree with a lot of what Peter says. It's very, very, very hard to beat this team. For example, a classic way to beat them, or is to get teams to go to fights where they don't have the summoner spells to actually win the fight. You both have all the ults up, but Ruler as an ADC is protecting and holding his summoner spells. It's the best I've ever seen of any player ever. It's what I call summoner spell economy. He'll die rather than use them. To have them in the dragon fight that's going to spawn in a minute time, he'll use them for the best version of a fight. It's crazy how good
he's basically the antidote to that thing. I actually did make the video finally 2 months ago or so on this topic that I know one of the number one pet peeves, Peter, of coaches is exactly that. It's when you have players where it's bro, you know that we were going to have a dragon fight in 40 seconds. Why did you take this pointless fight to kill the support and use your flash and an ult or something? But the joke is actually the one time that, and obviously here's the best part as well, dude. Not only is a pro player finally saving the ults, and they're the summoners rather. It's the best player in the world, dude. Yeah. The best player in the world's actually doing what everyone's been asking for years. The dream.
Yeah. The other problem. Oh, sorry.
No.
Yeah, jump in.
So I think that there's another problem on that as well, which is that JDG are really, really flexible with how they team fight. To give an example of this, you'll often see 369 normally positioned behind his AD carry. So you'll have a moving zone within the fight where Ruler and Knight will play around static objects, which I'm just calling 369 and Kanavi. But because 369 will sometimes stand behind his AD carry, Ruler will kite back into him, and 369 is really, really clear about when to step forward. Whereas a lot of teams will often do typical front to back team fights or flanking team fights, where you just have the tank there absorbing damage. But 369 is so good at preserving his resources, in this case health, because of how they position their team fights, and they will instantly collapse. They'll create zone control for their carries, and the one thing that JDG do that's so crazy is that they can collapse that zone and immediately recreate it in a different setup without any break in readjustment. And I mean, the problem you have with JDG is if you can't out team fight them, you need to stomp them early. You're trying to stomp Knight, Rula, and 369. I mean, how many of these guys are in the top? I mean, how many JDG players are in the top 10 players in the world? 4? 3?
Those 3 especially. Yes.
Yeah, it's like 3 or 4, right?
Yes.
So it's. I mean, it's so difficult.
A really good pick for this is Gragas. Like the amount of people who dive Ruler and then 369 body slams through Ruler on the Gragas as standing behind them, like knocks that person up, and then the secondary engage coming over the top gets split up because it then just drops barrel, and the entire time Ruler's just sitting auto-attacking people, and it's just like, it's a very unique way of team fighting, and it's an evolution. It's I don't know, Peter, if you maybe will do it, but it's one of the first times I've ever seen players team fight like that, and it's somewhat of an evolution of like League, in my opinion, or maybe so consistently.
I've seen individual people be able to do it, but nobody as consistently as JDG. And normally you'll see one person on the team who's really good at this. Yes. So like Peak Impact is somebody who I would say who's really good at this. True. But Kanavi can do it, 369 can do it. Heck, you put Knight on Syndra can do this. Like Knight can do this. So it's just crazy how they have that level of synergy. Like the only thing, so I know that a lot of the big analysts are pointing, they point to maybe Ruler or Knight as being the best players on this team. To me, the most important player, whether or not you think he's the best, is simply Kanavi, because the games where Kanavi is ahead and winning, there is literally no hope for you. Like, you will go to the teamfight phase, he will neutralize you, he will attack you on his right timers, and there is literally no hope. So the only way you can possibly show cracks in the armor are the games where it looks like Kanavi is inting. But actually, half the time Kanavi is inting, it's because the other team have a really smart plan for how to trap him in the jungle, or they punish a certain part of his overaggression or something like this. So those are the only games where JDG look vulnerable, because the games where he's ahead, his shot calling and his game sense and the way he's organizing, as he's being an on-field general for his team, means that you are not winning. So that's kind of what teams have to do. I was just looking at the lineups. Like, I was just imagining, is there a chance that like NRG could take a game? No, surely not. Like maybe with, I was just thinking about junglers who can punish this kind of thing, and Razork is the one that springs to mind. But like, Contracts has done that before against NA junglers. But
here's the thing: before people overreact, because they're all going to think now you're saying Contracts is better. What Peter means is, like, the one thing. Look, I'm not a Contracts fan, but one thing I'll say is he's always had a very high activity level. Like, he's definitely willing to go for a play early in the game for sure.
Yeah.
I think G2 could cheese them one game if home disrespect drafts. Like, home sometimes will just do drafts that are a little bit questionable. If home done like give Hansama Draven, give Mickey X, like a very favourable bot lane matchup, and then he ends up like counter-picking himself in jungle, G2 could cheese GDG, not cheese, but like they could run the numbers on GDG, right? But even in that situation, like it's still not like, even with the favourable draft, I would still say G2's more likely than not to lose the game, because you would still have to win the preceding team fights, and
yes,
it's so frustrating that a team like this is the best team in the world. You know, when IG was the best team in the world, with Peak the Shy, you always felt you had a chance. You always felt like, maybe Ning would like overstep, or like, maybe there would be a happy accident, with a level 2 gank or something on mid, or maybe you could kind of get Baolan. But like this team, like this, I just don't know. Like, I have no answer.
I'm with you, mate. The real problem is that they are, like, everyone over to use the term, they're OP. They are overpowered as fuck. Because as you said, you nailed it, like, Kira. The real problem here is, right, because they are both the best team in the world and a team that works really well, but also a super team. It's like, where are you supposed to get an edge? Like, as you said, like, normally the teams that are like this, by the way, like amazing, like fighting from behind in team fight, they don't have like all the best mechanics too. You don't get that as well. And they're also cleaners. Like, give me a break. Like, where am I supposed to, like, the best example is, I hope I'm remembering correctly, on Summoning Insight, we had, I think it was when we had Dylan Falco, because logically he'd be the one who'd like scrim JDG at MSI. And I'm pretty sure he said something like that when they they played JDG, it was like they could only either like completely stomp them super hard early or just lose every time late in a really scrappy game. Now, what's funny is I remember when he said this thinking, oh, dude, he's just giving like fake hope to Western fans because they're hearing that like, oh, holy shit, like you either stomp them so you win really hard or you barely win. And it's like, no, listen to what he just said there. These are scrims, motherfucker, where people do go like, you know, bloodthirsty as fuck. Even in scrims, you have to ultra stomp them or they are unbeatable. Like, essentially, if you let it go past a certain time on the game, they never lose. Like, when I hear that, it's the opposite. It's like, fuck, that's like... Because if people don't know, the best way to explain this is it's when I did an interview with Sven about the old T1. He said back then when you would play them as their opponent, even if you won a game in a best of 5, you were sort of thinking, like, they're still going to win though, aren't they? Like, they're going to come back now. Like, you even... I get the feeling everyone's going to have that vibe on JDG. Because the other angle as well is, like you say about the whole team fighting angle, this is also what's OP as fuck. Normally you have one player in the team fight that you're obsessed with. Like, it's either Ruler or Knight. And it's like, right, our whole mission, guys, is to create team fights where we can get this guy. And it's like, in this team, not only do they have 2 people like that who are complementary, different types of carries, then they have 369 as well. It's like, this is just unfair. Like, how is anyone supposed to get an angle? Because think about this. The JDG of last year also was mega at fight from behind. But they didn't have, like, all the best mechanical players in the whole world as well. Like, it's why I actually do think, low-key, this team will either be the greatest team ever and win worlds now, or they'll be the greatest what if ever. Like, they'll be the biggest tragedy. Like, all the pieces are there for them to be godlike. I'm also with you guys as well. Like you said earlier, the sad thing is we were trying to set up what Western teams have a chance. The only team I actually think really has a chance is either LNG straight up, because I just saw those games. Those were really good games, or Gen G hypothetically. Like, there's theoretically, and by the way, half the shit for why Gen G theoretically wins is why they're supposed to already win worlds and MSI, and they never do. So I don't know that I'll buy that one personally. Like, spoiler, I've been watching the last 5 worlds waiting for Chovy to do the perfect side lane and into win the game and be crowned as the best player ever. Like, it ain't happened, does it? It ain't happened.
But this is the really annoying part about Gen G, is I see them do it in LCK, and I see them the way. So T1 was arguably one of the best, I think, this early year.
The spring one, yes.
The spring one was one of the best early game teams I've ever seen in League of Legends, right? They didn't win anything, so everyone laughs at them, right? Because the end result is the only thing. But actual game to game to game, the things they were doing, I thought they were one of the best early game teams I'd seen, right? And Gen G destroyed them. Like, by the end, the way that Gen G was like beating them was like embarrassing. And the problem was, then I seen Gen G at MSI, and I was like, I don't even want to watch the rest of the series. Like, when I watched Chovy tilt on stage as Annie into BLG, I was just like, I don't want to watch the rest of the series. It's completely pointless. Like, mental is completely gone. Now, Gen G now have failed Worlds. They failed Worlds with arguably a better lineup last year, right? Okay, with Ruler and Chovy, who are, again, a great pairing with each other. The problem is, and it is a narrative, because, you know what I mean, when you look at LCK, it tells you otherwise. Gen G should be able to do X, Y, and Z, but then they go to an international tournament and they don't do it. So you're just like, what version of Gen G am I going to get? Because if I see Gen G go to this tournament and they start picking carry junglers for Peanut, I will alt F4 the fucking stream straight away, and I just know what the end result's going to be. But, you know, if I start seeing the iconic like things, the slow roll,
setting up the waves, all that shit.
Yeah, all that and stuff. Like, I was like, you know what I mean?
Yes.
Gen G are the only team I've ever seen when they're down 3 Drakes, and I'm happy about it. You know, I'm just
By the way, here's what we'll do. Obviously, we've done Gen G. Let's just pivot and talk about Gen G, and we'll just go region by region on the interesting thing. Here's what I would ask you, Peter. Right, one of the fears, essentially, I'll take the complaining part and just phrase it as a question. The real problem I have with the Gen G lineup goes like this. It's actually a little bit like, I'll use the T1 lineup he was talking about there. You know, when T1 looked awesome in the spring, like he says, and everyone was, you know, it's like Faker's Renaissance, and people don't know he actually looked awesome, and their style of play was mega unique. Like, it really was this style. I can see why Monty raved about it, where like they really would just be on like, they'd be like a screen away, but they would be able to like catch anyone. But at the same time, they were one of the only teams ever. Another thing I hate that coaches get so pissed off at, they were one of the only teams ever that chose not to fight Peter. They would actually actively not go to places where there's a fight that you don't want to happen. It's going to happen, and they would stay away, and somehow their ability to not engage certain fights meant they could do this style that was mega. They were the only team playing that style. But to me, that style, what they did, and then what Gen G's trying to do now, the downside is this, Peter, like we're saying, in a game that has no pressure, when you properly coach and it all goes well, it does look mega, that style. The problem becomes, it's a lot easier to just play a normal game of League of Legends like JDG's going to, and then have a team fight at the end. That is normal. Everyone knows that style. So essentially my question would be, is the sort of bar of execution for Gen G going to be a problem in this sense? Because I kind of agree. Like on paper, Yu-Gi-Oh style, this is an awesome style. It could be, you could win worlds doing this, but can you execute is the hard part, right? In the really tough games.
I mean, to me, it's really hard. I mean, I watch Doran, and the way that he plays side lanes, the way he plays pressure early, like he's so smart. Like about which waves he chooses to contest, what timers he chooses to trade on, when he chooses to proxy, when he chooses to cheat waves. He's really in sync with his team all the time. I think Doran is like one of the most. I think Doran and Zika coming into this tournament are like probably the two most underrated players.
Oh, he's slept on, yeah, for sure.
Because
half the shot on Doran, by the way, as far as I can tell, dude, is people didn't watch him play this year, so they think it's like the years past when he was like a meme. Like I said this on somebody, he's like, dude, he got better like year on year. That player, he's way better now. Yeah. I
mean, he keeps getting better, and it's his risk assessment. Like he's not in, right. He's not going to stomp you into the floor 1v1, but he's going to get these. He's going to get like 3 minions here, an extra wave here. You know, because he's fast on the rotation, he gets to like farm a Raptor camp, which in the mid game. And get an extra 4 CS or something, and he'll slowly cumulative advantages. The problem is you can make 10 small cumulative advantage plays, and then you lose the dragon fight to JDG.
There you go.
The Rat Dog effect. 7 good plays negated by 1 bad one.
Yeah, and I mean, I think that's the problem, right? Like Gen G, of all the teams, right? Okay, of all the teams right now, because obviously I'm a coach, so I love macro. I love it when teams don't.
Sure.
I mean, I love fighting too, but Gen G, the way Doran and Chovy play side lanes brings me so much joy.
Oh, it's amazing.
Put it this way, let me just frame it this way, Peter. If people don't know, like Monty did the most extreme version of this years ago on Somebody Insight, where there was a famous game. It was Jin Air versus someone, you might know Kira. It was Jin Air versus someone in Korea, and famously they really did win off like one team fight after like 45 minutes of like perfectly not engaging. And like it's like one team, it was like one team had like a kite comp, and then one had like the fucking pickup, whatever it was. It was like essentially Monty's dream scenario, where in the end they both played it correctly, Peter, the whole game. And at the end, there was one fight, and correctly, the team that won the game. The point is, like, along those lines, if you are a coach, your dream actually is seeing games where someone sets up all 3 pushing lanes and wins off that pressure, and it's like the other team doesn't know what they're doing. That's the dream that they actually... that's the shit you're telling your players all the time. Guys, we don't even have to actually, like, beat them to win. If you do this, you win automatically. But the problem is to actually get the player to do it in a game. That is the entire battle, right? It doesn't matter whether conceptually they understand it.
Of course. And when the other team can win when they're 3k down. Like,
exactly.
See more cool, funny, interesting clips based on topics from my content? Well, subscribe to this channel then, or, be a pleb and don't.